Welcome to today's special edition of Tea and Talks with myself, Owen Smith. Today we will be talking about VE Day with the people who were there and remembered. So I'm very lucky to be joined by Mr. Roy Dart, Joan Hope, and Leslie and Leela DeBow.
I was born in Stratford.
Oh, really?
There was a hospital in Stratford. It's not there anymore. I was born there, and I was born January 1939.
Oh, really?
And there was a certain Herr Hitler heard about that and thought he would do something to stop me telling all these terrible jokes and singing songs.
I got evacuated, but I wasn't away very long for the first wave of evacuation because I got earache and the people couldn't deal with me. So I was sent back home. So that's how I came to see lots of dog fights and whatever. And for some reason after that, I was sent away again to Norfolk. And when I came back, we'd moved about 7 or 8 doors down the road.
So tell me about being evacuated.
I was evacuated to Canada in 1940 for 3 years. 7 when we left the UK, we sailed from Liverpool, and I was a couple of months short of 10 when we returned to the UK during the war.
Right.
It's all very vague. I must have been about 5 or 6. We actually went to stay with family in Wales. It's all very vague at that period of time. You know, I can't. The thing is, I look back and I think, oh, I did this, I did that, I said this, I said that. But at that age, I couldn't have done. I was very clever, you know. But I do remember going to Wales, a little village near Merthyr Tydfil.
Right.
And I actually went to school. There was a school opposite where we stayed. But halfway through the lesson, I walked back to the house and I said, they're all foreign there. They're Germans. Because they were speaking Welsh. And of course, I didn't understand.
So you didn't learn any Welsh while you were there?
I didn't learn any Welsh, but I earned a few bob because they used to like me speaking with my East End accent, because it was even worse then, a real Cockney. And they loved that. They loved to hear the Cockney, so they'd give me a few bob to speak it.
Canada, well, really, you didn't hear much about the war except the news. And like the United States, the more you heard a lot more about the Japanese than about the Germans.
It was a little village. I can remember that we used to walk down the road, and in the middle, the roads used to split left and right. And in the middle, there was a cinema. And I got on very well with the manager and so on. And I used to go in, I used to go up in the projection box. But I do remember that there were geese running all around outside the cinema, you know. I'm sure I didn't make this up. I'm sure it happened.
What were your main sort of memories of this time?
That was from Richmond Avenue, watching the dog fights and the tracer bullets from the back door of the house with my father, and he was explaining to me what was going on.
Do you think did you understand it really or not?
I did, but I didn't really understand the dangers or whatever, you know, and I just found it exciting.
Oh, well, I was 7, yes, I knew there was a war on, yes. And we knew that it was quite dangerous going out. In fact, at one point we had a torpedo fired at the boat we were on. And I think on the next trip out, the boat was sunk.
Really?
With a loss of quite a few lives, yes. Well, the thing was that there was wartime, and we were allowed very little money, so we were really quite poor when she had 4 children to feed and herself, and I think that she was allowed about 25 quid a month.
Right.
we were most of the time we were extremely hard up. I can even remember some days being quite hungry, and so she was very glad when we got permission to come back during the war. She kicked up a stink, and I think she was at the British consulate almost every day complaining and wanted to go home. And she was a very determined lady, and I don't know, even they gave in, and we came home in the middle of the war in about we got home sometime in June 1943.
And it was the same when I was first evacuated, because first time I went with the school, and I'd only just recently fairly started school. So I remember marching to King's Cross Station, my mother sort of marching alongside, taking the weight of my backpack, and I just was so excited. First time I thought it was brilliant, going away without parents. And
actually during the war we had an air raid shelter, an Anderson shelter, and I can remember going there. I can remember hearing the bombs. I even remember the doodle bugs. I actually thought I'd shot one down because I was standing there with my toy rifle. Well, it's a wooden stick anyway. And when the doodle bug went over, I went pop, 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 and it stopped. I said, "Dad, I've got it." I got it all right when he pulled me in right round the ear. No, I think they just got on with it. I mean, my dad carried on driving his buses everywhere. He had no problem. The only problem he had was one night coming back from duty on his bicycle, because no lights. He went straight down a bomb crater because he didn't see it. But that's the only time he got injured in the war. My mother, I suppose, she just carried on chatting to all the neighbours. We didn't have any, from memory, no bombing right close to me, fairly near, across the road, further down. But I don't remember anything actually in our street. We had a few incendiary bombs. Because I know, as I said, my father used to, I think they used to call him a fire watcher, but he used to go out, deal with things like that. And I can remember him going down to somewhere down our road, but I didn't see a lot of it.
The station actually did get bombed, the underground station, and people killed there.
Right.
And then they just had a wooden shed thing there afterwards. But when I lived in Islington, there was lots of bombing going on around there. And the next street got direct hit, and I know I'd been there. There was a basement there where they used to put on film shows.
Right.
And so apparently there were people in there watching then that got killed.
Now, your parents actually had German prisoners of war sent you to work on your farm, didn't you?
Oh, yes. We had, first, I remember them, well, first of all, we had an Italian called Salvatore, and because I found a picture of him and my brother the other day. I was going through old pictures, and they used to go out shooting, so they both had their guns, and off they were out shooting for rabbits.
Whereabouts were you?
Herefordshire.
Ah, and was it your family's farm, or?
Yes. And then after the Italians went away, we had Germans, and I don't know, I think there was one there for a few weeks, but the military police came and got him. I remember that. It's funny the things you remember.
Yeah.
And then we had this very young lad. He was 17, and my mother, sort of mothered him and so on, and he stayed after the war. And quite a lot stayed. The one in my auntie's one, he stayed as well.
What was VE Day actually like?
VE Day, well, the house next door to us, the man was an editor of, peculiarly enough, the Daily Worker, which was the communist paper, and Farmers Weekly, and he knew nothing. No, he said he used to go to the pub and get all his information just talking to other people. So anyway, he came home and he told us, it was going to be announced the next day, VE Day. And, oh, we're brilliant. I thought, great, day off school. And then that morning got up, there was nothing on the radio, nothing. Right. And it was announced the following day. And then Bill next door said that, well, Churchill was too drunk to do the announcement.
Now, on VE Day, what I can't remember what we actually did.
Right.
But I do know that the VE Day party, my father was one of the main people to get it going. We had it in, obviously a street party. I got a sister by then. She was born in 1942, and I was dressed as a clown. Now, I think that was some sort of, do you think they were trying to tell me something even then?
I lived in a cul-de-sac, and funny enough, they didn't have one. Right. So everybody was sort of happy and, dancing about, but there was no laid out table or anything. Right. So I went round the corner and joined in another one.
We had street parties. So I remember we had a street party where people got their tables out, and we didn't have much, but there were some cakes and biscuits and cups of tea in the street, and everybody took part. People were quite cheerful. There were at least 2 or 3 families in the street who'd lost sons during the war, so there was certainly, it wasn't quite as joyful, certainly in our street, as people may have choose to remember now. There was a tinge of sadness, certainly for some people. And I can remember my mum almost avoiding one lady because she really couldn't bear speaking to her because she felt so sad about her son. And she didn't want to appear to be rejoicing when this woman had so much to sorrow for. I can remember my mum really being sad about avoiding her.
What was it like coming back to London? Did it feel odd?
I really didn't notice a lot of difference because I don't think I was away all that long.
Right.
What a gut feeling. I didn't go very long. And as it was family, I think, when we came back, I didn't feel like I'd actually been away.
Right.
I do remember sort of when I came back, my mother was the local, I won't say newspaper, but the house was always open. Everybody, we never had the door locked. We always had the kettle on. People were always in the house. We knew the local news before the local newspaper, I can tell you. So.
Did you lose anyone in the war, or?
Yes, an uncle of mine. In fact, the funny thing is, the family lived just across the road to me. I knew nothing about them till I got to go to grammar school. When I got in the queue, and they said, right, you get in alphabetical order, your name, I said Dart, and the next bloke, your name, he said Dart, I said, hey, and it was my cousin. And his father was killed in the war, Jim, but I believe he actually got run down by an army ambulance. I don't think he was actually killed. I think it was an accident.
So after the war, you still had national service, didn't you?
Yes, I had to go into the army after I had the choice when I was 18, because I'd got a scholarship. I had the choice of going up to university or taking deferment. As the Korean War was on the time, I took deferment and went into the army after I'd finished my university course.
And where did you end up going?
Nowhere. I was clerk in the War Office.
Oh, really?
I went on a couple of occasions. I got to France because I got to the SHAPE headquarters in Paris. And just before my demob in 1956, I was in Cyprus just before the British paratroopers landed in Suez.
Oh, really?
I was involved. I was at the was largely because I was simply part of my War Office duties were extended to Cyprus, and so they thought that we were going to, but nothing. I was just there for 3 weeks, and they brought us back because everything came to a halt.
Came out from National Service, the last lot were going in, November 60. I finished in Gibraltar. Lovely posting. I had a year in Gibraltar. And I mean, think about it, but I was 19 at the time. Most people at that period to go to Gibraltar, I mean, you were lucky if you went further than Southend. You know? But to Gibraltar, and from there, I used to go across to Spain. I learned some Spanish. We used to go across to Morocco on one of our trips, on one of our holidays. We actually got a train from Algeciras in Spain round to Marseille in France. So you know, I had a marvellous experience while I was in there.
What was national service actually like?
I was bored out of to tears the whole time. I spent my time in the War Office. I mean, I probably had an hour's work to do every day if I was lucky. So I spent most of my time drinking tea and looking at the ceiling and being bored stiff. So I couldn't imagine anything worse.
Before I was terrified of going in. I was useless. I was a natural born coward. You know, I was born with yellow streaks down the back of my shirts. I was terrible. And this fear that I would have to march. When I was in the RAF, everybody else, when they were doing all the physical exercise, I was always the one on the knot at the bottom of the rope when everybody else was at the top. I was always the one when we would have to swing on the rope across the pond. I was always the one that ended up in the water. I was absolutely useless. I mean, but at least I was in the RAF, which was a lot cushier than the army.
To be honest with you, because I was stationed in London at the War Office and I had a lot of free time, I had a hell of a good time outside office hours. I was a young man. With my various allowances which you got for living in London, I had enough money to live on, and so what can you say? It was partying 4 days a week.
Well, when I got the call-up papers, I had to go for a medical in Wanstead. There was the place. I tried everything to make all the things go wrong. Like when they tapped my left knee, I kicked the right knee up, hoping that they'd say I wasn't fit. Anyway, we had to do an exam or a test, and I was fairly well up. I wouldn't say I was brilliant, but I was a little bit brighter than some of them. And then you were asked which service you wanted to go in. They said, well, you couldn't go in the Navy because for 2 years they wouldn't take anyone. And it's just as well because I get seasick on the Woolwich Ferry. I'd be useless in the Navy. So I had two choices, the Army or the RAF. And my cousin had been in the RAF and he told me, oh, it's cushy. Once you've got the square bashing over, it's a dead cushy. So I had an interview and the officer said, well, yeah, your tests are fine. I think you're all right. Now, why do you want to come in the RAF? And I said, well, my cousin was in. And he said, it's a lot easier than the Army. He said, right, you're in.
Thank you to everyone who joined me today. Roy Dart, Joan Hope, Leela and Leslie DeBow. And thank you so much for sharing some of your stories with us today. Join us next week and stay safe, be creative.